Welcome to NeuroNoodle's Neurofeedback and Neuropsychology Podcast, featuring tech legend Jay Gunkelman. He's the man who has read well over 500,000 brain scans, and Dr. Marie Swingle, author of iMinds. Our goal is to provide information and promote options for better mental health. The NeuroNoodle Podcast is supported by listeners and businesses just like you.
How are we doing?
You're going full Gunkelman on me here, huh?
I got it bad. Nice.
Hey, Jay.
Hey, Tiff.
Hey, Pete.
Tiff!
Good to see you.
Good to see you. I didn't think I was going to see you. Here you are again.
Wait, hold on. You didn't get the memo? Let's see if Dr. Marie got the memo. So, Jay, we got Tiff. We're going to see her in a month, right?
Well, I hope so, I mean, I got to get there still, It's the intention. And
I intend to be there. Yeah, it'll be fun. 75th?
76 years.
76.
Yeah.
1949 baby.
Yeah, boomer baby.
You're boomer baby. Yeah.
The leading edge of the boomer babies, so
Yeah.
in the 40s, not the 50s. So
I said, how do you know Tiff, or how don't you know Tiff?
well, first of all, we didn't meet in North Dakota, although we both have history back all the way to North Dakota. So when we get together, there's a lot of yas and things like that start to pop out. Anyway, I hope I don't get a yash or you betcha out of anybody today. So, but she interviewed as the executive director candidate for the California Biofeedback Society, which was morphing into the Western, WABN, Western Association, Western Regional.
Neuroscience and biofeedback. That's right.
Yeah. And she interviewed for the position and had great qualifications. She actually has gone to the pain of learning to be a registered EEG tech and taking the exam and all of that. That's not common in the field. There's a few, but that's a credential that requires an academic focus on the details of EEG technology and montages and amplifier stuff that a lot of people don't really end up having to know. So she's got depth in that respect, and if I recall, the only condition was she didn't want to have to do the books.
That's exactly it. It's still the case. It's still the case. Yeah, Jay was the president when I was the executive director, and so we threw some good parties together. And that was the BSC back in the day. That was one of the first shaving of Jay's beards.
Before it was so gray,
Yeah, Pete, I'll find you that video because it's
how
really
much did we get for that one?
$2,000.
$2,000, okay.
Well, it was a little regional organization, it wasn't a national event, and but a lot of people pitched in. John LeMay had a few $100 in on that. Cynthia Curson was ranting, "Don't you ever grow that thing back?" And as I said, what about opera conditioning? Don't you understand? You've just paid me for having grown one. It'll happen again, So, but $24,625 total across the years for shaving this thing off. So, and how long has this been? About that long. It's about time. So, we'll have this one up for auction in October. So,
nice.
Dr. Marie, welcome. Say hi to Tiff.
Hello.
Hi, Mary. You look beautiful.
How goes things?
Good.
Jay, you look beautiful too.
Jay, you look beautiful too.
And I thought I was the one that had to have eye trouble,
I love the monocle.
Wait,
I've
didn't
seen
you?
you tease with it, but I haven't seen you wear it yet. It's great.
Come on, Dr. Marie. Let's go.
There you go.
Oh gosh.
As Pete says, you didn't get the memo, so
No.
no. And I see computer keyboard and close perfectly well without it. And I was just out on the veranda, as Renita calls it. We redid the deck, and it's got a nice overhang, and it's a pleasant spot to catch a morning. So the pup and I were out there before coming in.
So Tiff, help out my ignorance here, because I'm just a video editor here, trying to catch up on things. What is your background? How did you get into neurofeedback? I am very curious, and so are the listeners and viewers.
There's a longer story, which is a little bit more interesting, but it was
Get
kind of
comfortable.
a
Go ahead.
wayward route. It wasn't the plan. It wasn't the plan at all. So my graduate degree was in rhetoric, actually, in political rhetoric. I was an ancient rhetoric. And then I thought, what am I doing with this graduate degree? And I decided to pursue, a psychology degree, another master's, and a new career in wind energy simultaneously. So I got a job doing land acquisition for wind energy farms and pursued a master's in counseling psychology, kind of casting a wide net. And I graduated with the next degree. And I said to my graduating class, I'm not gonna move into mental health. That's not what I'm here to do. I just don't think talk therapy has teeth. And so I pursued the wind energy career, and I helped build some wind farms, and it was lucrative, and an egoic badge. And then I ran across neurofeedback in Hawaii. I actually had a Vedic astrologer tell me my entire life would change on May 17th, 2011. And I was moving through a breakup and heartache, and I thought, well, golly, I'm going to see if that's the truth, right? So I happened to buy a Groupon on May 17th in Honolulu for a clinic called Brain Fitness Hawaii. And not really knowing what I was doing, I walked in, and this little Asian woman presented me with the menu. And the menu said, "What do you want in life? Pick 5 things." And I chose my 5 things, and I can't remember all of them today. But from that menu, she decided where to put electrodes on my head. And she sat me down in front of a screen. And I was sat in front of Bill Scott's brain paint, and I watched this mandala grow and shrink with all different colors. And my objective was to make this mandala big and beautiful. And then I was sat in front of another screen with a red bar and a green bar. And the red bar said, "What isn't?" And the green bar said, "What is?" And I was supposed to make the green bar big and the red bar small. So I left that clinic that day aflame. I was just I was like, this is it. This is what I'm going to do. I'm going to go and do this. And so in short time, I contacted everybody in Santa Barbara that did it. I quit my job and my 6-figure salary. I was slowly made my way into debt. I went into credit card debt, just trying to get my feet under me in this field. And I earned my stripes. I learned from some people. I had some business partnerships not work out, but it was it. This was the it. And so it took me to starting my own clinic, which is where I'm sitting today, which is called NeuroField Neurotherapy, and starting a school, an online and brick and mortar sometimes school called the School of Neurotherapy. And I found my husband, Nick Dogris, and I made babies. And and the rest is history. So that's my story.
I didn't know you were married to Nick.
Oh, good.
Oh, good dude. Good choice.
Yeah, good. We're very different people. I tell people, don't confuse me with Nick. He's awesome. I love him, but I'm definitely not him. And I don't want to be him.
How did you meet Nick?
I met Nick at ISNR.
In this field, how do you not meet Nick?
Yeah.
You're supposed to say Tucson City.
Yeah. So I met Nick at a conference, and it's another story, but I was giving a speech at ISNR. I didn't even know what ISNR was, and I submitted something just kind of threw together the neurobiological correlates of paralinguistics, right? Because I was a rhetoric major, and I thought, well, why not throw a hat in the ring? And I got selected, and I didn't even know until 3 weeks before. And it was a 3-hour lecture, so I poured myself into this lecture. It was a Prezi presentation, and I was working on it late at night, and I walked to the elevator. There was a party happening across the hall. I was wearing my yoga pants and tennis shoes, and the elevator door closed on my face. And I thought, well, that's a sign. I'm not supposed to go in the elevator. So I turned around. I thought, I'm going to go to that party. And so I walked into the party, and that was Nick's party, and Jay was there. And that was the beginning of meeting Nick. But Nick wasn't available quite yet. And I didn't get together with him until, the next year. Yeah. And I didn't.
Did you give him neurofeedback to sway him over to your way, or how did
Quite
that?
the opposite. Yeah, the opposite.
That's outstanding. So when you got into it, you go from wind farms to neurofeedback. Did you go through the process of insert school name here, where you pay $1,600 and
For
learn?
sure. Yeah. So thanks for that question. Yeah. So along the way, I found my way to this psychologist's office who was my supervisor, and now I'm thinking, okay, I guess I am going to get a license as a marriage and family therapist, because you need a license in this field. It's much better to have one than to not. And then I decided to get a PhD, and I worked in a neurology clinic. And when I sat in this neurology clinic, the very first time I sat in front of a full EEG, I had this moment of remembering as a child how cool it would be to look at the squiggles in a dark room on a screen, and I thought, oh my gosh, this is really something. So that was how I got my REEGT. And then I got the QEEGD and the BCN. And so, you just kind of collect these things as you go along. But that was the path. That was the beginning of that path. So yeah, I pursued several different avenues of getting letters behind my name that ultimately
I
are
wasn't at the
meaningful.
beginning of the meeting, but I'll just say it out front for anybody who doesn't know Tiff. She's one of the most brilliant current minds in the practice right now.
Oh, you're nice.
Well, you know it. Somebody has to say it, and you can't say it yourself. So there you go.
Wow, you're kind. Thanks, Mary. Back at you.
So Tiff, okay, so you got into it. Where's the office at? Are you in Cali? Like, what's the next step in the progression?
Yeah, we're in Santa Barbara. We're in Santa Barbara, California. So NeuroField Neurotherapy we focus foremost on neurostimulation. We do a lot of neurodiagnostics and a lot of EEG and ERP. We don't do as much neurofeedback as other folks. We do a lot of neurostimulation. So that's transcranial modalities like alternating current, direct current, pink noise stimulation, brown noise stimulation, vagus stimulation, photobiomodulation, which a lot of folks do, which is light therapy, and then PEMF. So that's our primary modality, and that is Nick's company, NeuroField, hardware software company, that is his brainchild. That's what he's developed. And so that's a lot of what we use with our patients here in Santa Barbara.
Vagal nerve stimulation is all the rage now. And one of the things, when we first started doing this, almost when the dinosaurs were around, we were very, very cautious about it, meaning we'd do one little stim, wait a few days. We never did more than 3 in a week, et cetera, et cetera. Can you kind of share how the field has changed? And if there is such a thing as too much stimulation? That's one of the things that I'm concerned about, but I'd like to bow to your expertise.
With vagus stimulation?
Yeah.
I mean, I was first introduced to it with a client who had an implanted vagus modulator. So it was in her body, and I thought that was pretty radical. I can't speak to the history of vagus stimulation. Maybe if I sat down and pulled together a presentation on it. But what I can say is, I do think it's important to measure, if one can, the ratio of sympathetic and parasympathetic activation. And we do that with simple HRV measure. And then the modality that we use is actually using the tragus, and we push a biphasic waveform through the tragus. And the candidates for that are individuals who show high levels of sympathetic activation. And those are the folks we find it useful for. But you're right, this is all over the market. You can go online and you can buy a little vagus thing and stick it on your neck. And
is it vagus or Vegas?
Oh, is that where you are?
The
It's
vagus
beautiful.
nerve. I'm here for a vagus nerve conference and checking in. We talked about this yesterday. One of the things that came up in our Q&A yesterday, Jay and Dr. Marie, was the different standards and recognitions that are out there, APA, all the different organizations that have folded in, due to lack of capital. We go over some of those because we had a lot of questions on that, and people just want to know. They're looking for some higher body to say, hey, this is legit or not.
Well, historically there were many small state organizations that were all under the umbrella of AAPB, and most of those over the time, well, as it's hard to run a little organization. It just takes one cycle of a couple of bad officers and it falls apart. So uh, California was one of the longest standing. It was actually, back to the beginning of the societies. It was California's had state biofeedback meetings back in the early 70s. So uh, we showed my pocket-sized brainwave analyzer in 1976 at one of their meetings at the Carlton Hotel in Berkeley. So anyway, the state organizations tended to fail, and they were all linked basically to APB. Some of them that remain are the Midwest, which is Michigan and the surrounding area. And that's largely due to some vendors, Brian Milstead kind of grabbing him by the scruff of the neck and not letting him fail. Uh, uh, the Northeast Regional has been run very well. Angelica Sater was their executive director and did a good job with them for quite a long time. And they've developed a good organization that's got some good inertia and enough interest in membership, and their meetings are good enough that they actually make enough money to pay an executive director. As Tiff knows, it takes an executive director to wrangle an event and keep things moving. So um, Mid-Atlantic is still going. Florida's got a state society. It's not terribly active, but it's still going. Texas has a biofeedback society that's still going. Yeah, but the bulk of the rest of them have all folded back into APB.
So like when Tiff started, like, what was the first organization you got into? Because you're just learning it and then you want to join something and then it's evolved. Because there's new practitioners that are coming in and are like, all right, what training should I get? Who's my mentor? What program should I be a part of? How was it for you, Tiff? And then if somebody's going to start today, what is the progression that these new
Yeah.
people should get into?
That is the question. So my foray into the field it was bushwhacking. I mean, it really was. Jay was actually one of the first people I reached out to because people told me to go to him. And I was so new to it that I was sort of bowled over by the information that Jay was explaining to me. And so it used to be something where you kind of had to claw your way through and figure it out. The impetus of the School of Neurotherapy, honestly, was to make a path so that bushwhacking isn't necessary. And I'm one of several educational providers that offer different certification programs. But the first thing that the individual looking at entering the field of neurotherapy should think about is, how much bandwidth do I have to put into this and what do I want to get out of it? So there's several different schools, right? There's a brain master school. There's sort of the NeuroField School of Neurotherapy school. There's, people that are really into MITSAR and WIN-EEG. There's, the Swingle modality, which is one of the ones that I learned. But all that said, it should take a little bit of probing the field first to figure out where you want to go. Most people start out by getting their BCN, their board certification in neurotherapy, and learning under the tutelage of someone that's already board certified and licensed in the field. That's ideal. But if you're in the middle of nowhere Sometimes you have to get it going on your own and figure that out on your own. And then the next certification, and sometimes people get this first, and that's fine too, is the QEEGD, the quantitative EEG diplomacy, which is it's a fairly rigorous exam. It's a 40-hour course. You get 10 hours of mentorship, which is not a lot, and then 5 hours of case presentation. So it is a bit more of a sophisticated certification. I tell folks the BCN is like a bachelor's degree. The QEEG is kind of like a master's degree because it's a sign of competency in the processing of EEG data. So the pursuit of those two credentials is the certification route, but the what technology do I want to use route is something where, honestly, people would be advised to like go to conferences and meet people, reach out to folks, see what suits them. Neurofeedback, neurostimulation. What kind of neurofeedback? Z-score Loretta? Do you want to do single channel training? Infra-slow, infra-low, EEG info, the Othmer method, blah, blah, blah. I mean, so it's still somewhat ungainly in that one piece. And unfortunately, it's all kind of lumped together under the same term, neurotherapy or neurotherapy, which contains neurofeedback and neuromodulation, neurostimulation. But what is created, and this is a term that Jay has coined, is the circular firing squad within our field, right? I guess not coined, but this is something that you've dubbed, and so I'm going to be delivering a presentation at ISNR here in a couple weeks called the Circular Firing Squad, and it's on the history of rivalry and infighting in our field, because unfortunately the roots of our field are ones where individuals are competitive and there's jealousies and there's rivalries and I think it's actually one of the things that's kind of stunted the growth of our field. It's prevented us from really have all these beautiful modalities from them really, growing into something that has a larger span, a larger reach.
Yeah, if
Yeah.
I could piggyback what Tiff was going on, going back to training, I think the best thing is either an apprenticeship or a mentorship on top of everything that Tiff was suggesting. But that kind of grows into, I think, the other one that we need to start talking about. You're talking about the firing squad, but also the theft, right? In terms of one of the, I would say, emergent problems in our field is everybody's going proprietary, which is needed because when we publish a lot of the data, our methods, et cetera, it tends to be incorporated without any talk of whose intellectual property it is, et cetera. And I think that's one where I would love the open communication to be able to share methods, research, et cetera, without fear that your hard work, time and dime, et cetera, is appropriated by somebody. I think that's a big issue that we need to put on the table. The other is reliability and validity of equipment. And again, that comes into the proprietary that, many of us now feel that we need these little cages around what we're doing because of that. And I think this is something we should be very, very overtly talking about because this permits space for individuals to come in with equipment or practice methods wherein there's no evidence of reliability or validity. And I think that's a very, very, I don't want to say dangerous loop, but it's something, again, that could plague our practice and bring us down. It permits the individuals to not know what they're doing or not know what their equipment is doing because, rightly so, inventors or instigators of the methods need to protect. So I know this is not a topic that people like to talk about, but I think it's very, very important, right? I mean, right now we're going on names of people, known researchers, names of companies, et cetera, but it's an issue.
We get into the standardization conversation again, because that's kind of, we led this off with the different boards and certifications that are out there, ISNR, APA, go down the list, but
don't we need somebody to be like the leading voice? Hey, this is what we're going to do. This is the procedure. This is, we approve this equipment. We don't approve. We approve this protocol. Because it's the Wild West out there. It's been the Wild West since 1972. When is Lewis and Clark going to come out and pave the way for us?
Who's going to do it though? That's the catch. I mean, this is where I
And
think BCIA is in a wonderful position.
there's probably a point in time that you circle the wagons because you've got them all together. But uh, uh, who's going to decide what's in and out? I mean, the principles of science have publication and peer review, and if you've got evidence that your protocol and your hardware and everything works, there's ways to show that. FDA clears medical devices. Uh, Publications can show outcomes. Meta-analyses can end up gathering together lots of small studies and actually show, the field has efficacy. So, you know, I'm quite pleased with the level of neuroscience that's developed. I have to say that when I started, there really wasn't any efficacy proof of anything. So everything was, clinical research, well, or just plain research, not clinical.
Hey everyone, if you're enjoying the show and want to help us keep it going, please consider supporting us on Patreon. Your support helps improve the content and brings on great guests and grow the show. Join us on Patreon at patreon.com/NeuroNoodle. But hey, if supporting financially isn't in the cards right now, no worries. You can still help us out for free by liking, subscribing, and sharing this episode. It really makes a difference and helps more people find the show. If we've earned it, hit that subscribe button and turn on notifications so you never miss an episode. The NeuroNoodle Podcast is supported by listeners and businesses just like you.
Again, back to it. Who's going to lead this thing? I mean, I'm throwing out ISNR. Okay, certified ISNR. We approve using this equipment. Here's a list of providers, because I get people asking me all the time, "Hey, can you recommend somebody in Idaho?" And then I say, well, go to BCIA and go to the list there. If I'm going to say go to BCIA, why can't they be more of a voice, or pick somebody to be a voice? Because you have a bunch of people that want to try this out, but there's so many different capitalists out there that are saying my way is best and your way is not best, and it confuses the market, and we get stuck where we're at.
It's the catch of self-governance, right? I mean, the beautiful thing is we started to do that, and BCIA was a wonderful effort by some key people to start that, which is fantastic. But if we talk reality, we're still trying to bust into traditional circles, and that's where I think some of the infighting, and maybe Tick could speak to that, really, really brings us down. So I think this is where we need to be very, very transparent. I'm a true believer in what I call complementary competence, also because that gives you more differential insight, should I say, meaning if you're trying to select between equipment, you'll recognize the scientific truths from merely the jargon and the language. I mean, obviously, if you learn to read the raw EEG, you're going to be able to really, really know whether what you're doing is affecting change. Same thing with, some of the numerical conversions. Topographies, everybody's heard me talk about this. Once they're printed out, sometimes it can be really, really hard to differentiate, whether it's been properly artifacted, et cetera, et cetera. But I think this is where the learning comes in. And, we have fabulous mentors in this field. Who are, and again, BCI has a nice list of mentors, and Tiff has mentioned a few folks as well. So if there's a will, there's a way. But as with anything, be cautious and do your due diligence. Yeah. There are brilliant minds in our field who are mentoring and open. And Jay, I think you're the model, just in terms of how open you have been through your whole career in this, welcoming and shepherding students, et cetera, right?
And I've never felt competitive with any of the other QEG people or EG people either. I mean, most of the people that are providing QEG and analytic services were customers of mine, and I didn't get upset because they went into service business. That as I say, if you're an antique store
Yeah.
and an antique store moves into the neighborhood, you don't get upset about it. You just became the antique district. Now everyone knows how to find you.
Yeah.
So co-opetition is the proper model. Our customers don't know who we are, they don't know what we do, and they don't know how to find us. So how are we in competition?
Go to Google and look up neurofeedback and look at all the ads that pop up, and you're a mom with a kid with autism and you got to pick one. It's crazy.
Well, I mean, I agree
And
100% with
we
what
do
Jay.
have
Yeah.
we do have a lot of cleanup to do within our field for devices that are claiming to be neurofeedback or neuromodulation devices that are scam devices. The QXZI Skyon thing out of Canada, which was not even an inexpensive device. It was an expensive device that people would have to really cough up a lot of money, and but it was there wasn't any core feedback of a physiological basis of anything in the device. Kind of a random number generator device. So we've had people selling franchises to non clinical people to operate and run like a clinic. And those franchises don't necessarily end up in a good place. You see class action litigation to try to shut them down. Brain state technology, Siraset. But the one who was the head of all of that, Lee Gertis, has passed a few years ago now. So I think a lot of that impetus may be fading away.
If you're the guest, what do you think? How do we move this pebble up the hill with our nose?
You're asking me?
Yeah.
Well, I hear what you're saying, and it almost sounds like you're saying, gosh, we should have we should be regulated by the Behavioral Board of Sciences or, some sort of higher level, you know, uh, managing governmental body. And I do think that within my lifetime, this field will become a standard of care. I really do. And that's the big shot. That's the big goal, right? So what are the steps to get there?
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, that's a great question. It's one that I think I'm going to noodle on a little bit since you're proposing
You're on
it.
the right podcast, the NeuroNoodle.
So, I mean, we do have our own, certifying bodies of the IQCB, International QEEG Certification Board, and the BCIA, the Biofeedback Certification International Alliance. So that's a start, and they do have some rigor in place. But they really don't have clubs and handcuffs, you know what I mean? And clubs and handcuffs, those are used by the licensing agencies, and the licensing agencies go after people who have licenses or people who act like they have licenses and don't. And so to get us to that level, there's several steps, and I can't detail for you what those steps are, but I can say that if we have the goal of becoming a board underneath the Board of Behavioral Sciences in each individual state, those steps will appear. They will arrive, right? And maybe that will be the impetus of the cleanup that Jay's talking about, where we have, every Dick, Tom, and Harry trying to schlep a, train your brain or stimulate your body kind of device. It will happen inevitably, but we are in the times of, RFK Jr. Presiding over, Make America Healthy Again, and the Wild West might just be getting wilder before before it gets more tame.
Stir up that nest. What are you talking about? What's going on? Just between us.
Yeah, I mean, I'm not. I'm not like politically speaking in terms of sides, I'm not gonna vocally lean in either direction. Because I think things simply are when they're happening, and I take a lot of a comfort in that actually, as opposed to thinking this is good or this is bad. But we know that he's anti-pharmaceuticals. He's been vocal about that. He's been anti-vaccine. He's been vocal about that. There are a lot of things that he's talking about that are going to be a big challenge, right, to a lot of people in America, and a lot of people are really kind of at their wits' end. There's been, lots of public outcries about, 1,000 different scientists from, the HHS saying, we disagree with your positions. But that piece aside, which is not necessarily all good, although big pharmacy does have kind of a stranglehold on the FDA in a way, or vice versa. I don't know which is which, but they are in partnership in ways. So there is a little bit of truth in some of the madness, right? And I'm not the one to tell you which is truth and which is madness. But that said, in his pivot to more alternative methods and modalities, it may open up the playing field for some of these less orthodox modalities to move through, right? Some of these alternative modalities to move through. And I'm a clinician who works primarily with, neurostimulation. We see, I don't know how many people a day, but a lot of folks come through every day, and we have a lot of clinicians that use our hardware and our software to work with all different types of psychopathy and pathology. And it's really effective and it works really well. And so we might be the beneficiaries of that wilder Wild West.
What do you think he's going to do positive for us?
I think he's going to make it easier to get some of these devices across the finish line of the FDA.
So less regulation, that sounds about right.
Well,
And Jay gets nervous when he hears that.
Well, I mean, I don't know if I would say perhaps easier regulation,
Okay.
So NeuroField is a company that's been trying to get, one of our devices right now across the finish line for a decade. We've spent over, I don't know how much money, an insane amount of money to be, and this is primarily Nick. This is not me. But just to move through. And so that process has been challenging and long and arduous. And, I think that there's lots of companies that have really had to like pay everything that they make, lose money to try to get approved. And so I think that loosening some of those rigors might be beneficial for us.
Jay, why would it take 10 years? You got to pay the administrations? I don't get it. Testing?
Regulators end up tossing hurdles at you. You cover one, they'll toss another. So it's not easy to get a new treatment modality approved for a treatment of something. First of all, they're going to want you to be able to treat something in the DSM, which is imaginary categories anyway. So the proof levels that they're looking for are the kind of thing that you get from a pharma research, control studies and
so PTSD, Jay, and ADHD, those two right there. I mean, the veterans are using getting help with PTSD. So why hasn't that moved along?
You think the veterans are effectively getting help with PTSD?
Well, I thought the efficacy with
that's a good one, Pete.
I thought neurofeedback was good for PTSD. No?
Yeah, it's good for lots of things, but PTSD is a behavioral cluster that has lots of different kinds of presentation to it. So it's not just one thing.
If the military here, let's start with the cats and Barry Sturman.
Quite a few years ago, the military wanted the government needed advice as to how to spend their money, and they convened a giant meeting that was by invitation only. The vendors that wanted to get in the door were kept out by the Marines, and there were vendors that tried to get in and were kept out physically by the Marines. In fact, they damn near body slammed one of the organizers who tried to push through without his credentials. He forgot them at the hotel. And one of the other organizers saw that it was about to go down onto the pavement and said, "No, no, I got a car. I'll get you to the hotel and back real quick." But they contacted me because they had invited Dirk and they had invited Yuri, and neither one of them had responded. And they asked me, why? And they get invites all the time, and so I asked them to come to the event, and I got in because they got in. If you're carrying the Queen's trailer behind her, you get in, So I came in with the luminaries that they had invited. But the purpose of getting in was basically to make sure that neurofeedback and biofeedback could be on the list of approved technologies for treatment for PTSD and TBI. To start with, they were not willing to allow neurofeedback because the literature wasn't very solid. But we pointed out that brain-computer interface, on the other hand, had really good literature. It's the same damn thing, feedback for a different subtle purpose, but we got biofeedback, neurofeedback in as approved technologies through knowing the research well enough to provide access to. They saw, well, the science is good enough for BCIA, so neurofeedback is allowed. And for TBI and PTSD. And EEG, QEEG. Well, QEEG was controversial. No. There's no QEEG is not going to be approved. Well, digital analysis of EEG is a billing code. Well, geez, if it's got a freaking billing code, it's okay, So the quantitative processing of the EEG once it's collected is something that you can bill for, and so we got quantitative EEG in for approved technologies as well. And again, there were hurdles to cross that you had to be there to end up getting things approved. But for TBI and PTSD, neurofeedback and QEEG, QEEG ended up on the approved technology list. Or if we weren't there, they wouldn't have been. So it was a good use of time.
So Jay, may I ask Jay a question? Because as he knows, I've been reaching out to some folks to get the scoop on this idea of the circular firing squad. And I was chatting with Bob Thatcher the other day about the CPT code that was going to be used for Z-score neurofeedback. Do you remember this event with Joy Lunt and Z-scores bad? There was a move that was approved by the APA or some credentialing organization, to say yes, we can get a CPT code for neurofeedback. Gavel on the table, it's done, and then apparently someone in the background said, no, don't do that, don't do that, don't do that. So I've heard stories. I'm trying to wrap my mind around, what the stories are, but don't worry about it. It's not going to make.
Well, there's plenty of controversies to end up seeing. Just look around, and more than enough anecdotes to illustrate the circular firing squad.
Yeah.
And you know how effective it's been to promote things, you have a great future in the circular firing squad,
Well, you brought up Thatcher. One of the biggest things, like, whose database is right? You got his, and then you got Yuri's, and mine is right. And even with the clinic, you're trying to figure out which do I use.
When we get into right and wrong, that's where all the problems start. And I hope this is going to be in Tiff's talk.
If you have a database, you should have it through the FDA. It should be registered. It's a normative non-rubber ruler to use to measure something medical and neurophysiologic, and any good database is basically already got clearance through the the FDA. And it includes basically things in the database that are used to differentiate or diagnostic differentiation. So if you have a discriminant analysis, that discriminant analysis really needs to have clearance through the FDA. And they went after Roy John's database in the original Spectrum 32 when it had discriminants. Unipolar versus bipolar depression, alcoholism or normal, that whole bunch of things that could differentiate one thing from another, TBI versus normal and so forth. And the FDA fined them $1 million and shut them down. They couldn't sell their device anymore. And they didn't go out and take yours away from you, but they couldn't manufacture any more of them, and they couldn't support the ones that were already sold. And they had a Y2K problem because they had a 2-digit for the date of birth. And so, well, about Y2K, it was a 386 computer with accelerator boards. So when Y2 came, they were due to be killed off anyway. Technologically, they were an antique. They had an 8.5-inch floppy. A worm drive, 8.5-inch floppy for inputs and stuff. Archaic technology at the time, but the FDA actually had people in their office to make sure that they didn't interact with customers, and that's the same shutdown and $1 million fine was tossed at Lexicor. Lexicor agreed to go through and get their device through the FDA, and their fine went down to $100,000. They spent the rest of it to get it through, but then, the Lexicor as a company basically folded anyway. So,
Tiff, do you think it's an easier sell or easier journey with the client to do a QEEG first? Like when kids are going to school, they have to get a physical. Can a kid get a mental to get a baseline just in case something happens? That way you don't get stuck in the weeds of explaining neurofeedback. You're just saying, hey, we're going to set up a baseline for you. What do you think?
I mean, it's just sort of a standard of care, like everybody gets an EEG. I guess I would say you'd want to wait until they reach a certain point of maturation. I mean, it'd be interesting to have a database of a lot of healthy pediatric EEGs, but they're going to change and change and change and change until they reach, I mean, even beyond their teenage years, but there's some stability that starts to come in roughly 9-10 years old. It's a good idea.
Well, I'm just thinking, because if I could go back in time with my magic wand, number one, I would never buy my neurofeedback equipment new. I would just wait till people had get out of it and buy it on Facebook Marketplace. Number two, I would focus on all the open-minded psychologists out there that want to add neurofeedback to their business, and they want to use the data to help with their talk therapy to do this, scans for them. I would do more of that. But you got any advice for somebody because you got to go and you got to pay the equipment. If you're a dummy like me that spent 20 grand on my 19 channel that's sitting on the shelf, how can you monetize this? Because a lot of clinicians, they're good clinicians, but not a lot of good clinicians are good business people.
Okay, well, so there's two things, right? First, there's a saying that says, how do you make a small fortune in neurofeedback? You start out with a large fortune, right? Many people talk about being equipment poor, and I personally have a graveyard of equipment. I've done everything, right? And there's something to that, actually, that does show some chops and some merit. But this is what I would say if someone's a clinician of any sort, a mental health care practitioner, a nurse, you really are best suited to have a license starting out. That is ideal, though not everybody does, but that would be, a good place to start. But even if you don't, I would say, if you could focus on a particular niche, that would actually be pretty wise. I could run a panic clinic, easy. Anxiety and panic all day long. That's some of my favorite stuff to work with because it moves quickly. But I don't. I run a neurotherapy practice that treats a lot of different things, and that might be, sort of we're the panacea. We can treat everything, autism, head injury. It starts to sound a little bit hokey, but for people starting out, I would say pick the demographic that you want to really focus on or the symptomology that you really want to focus on and do your research and figure out which device you really want to port yourself into because you want to know how to use it well. And if you're set up if you have the bandwidth to take a weekend long course and, learn how to push a couple buttons, that's not it. I would say don't even bother. This is a 90-degree learning curve, and it doesn't let up until you're pretty far up. And the more you don't know in this field. The better you get, the more, not incompetent, but the more you realize, oh my gosh, there's so much more to know. And when we're looking at the electrical chemical reactions and goings on of the brain, we're looking at the most complex noise in the known universe, literally. So who are we? It's an incredibly humbling field. It's a lifetime long education. And if you're not ready to do that, to pour yourself into it to that degree, prepare to be mediocre.
Well, there's a lot of
You'll
prepared
never be
people out
bored.
there.
You'll never be bored.
Right?
So Tiff, we're going to try to send you some clients. Before we get to that, do you do any remote? Because a lot of people are starting to find a niche in remote, if you got a graveyard, send the graveyard out and rent it and get data for
Oh,
the
at
remote stuff.
home?
No?
At
Yeah.
home? Not to any great extent, no.
Okay.
We do have some at-home equipment, but like we have a PEMF and a photobiomodulation device, but no, not really.
Fair
Yeah.
enough.
But I do work with a lot of, similar to Jay and probably Mary, I work with a lot of clinicians. So I do a lot of analysis for other folks who are in the field. And so if you're still learning, it's really good to mentor with somebody and get a feel for them and maybe many people. And then I work with patients all day as well. So yeah.
Where do we send people your way, Tiff?
So we're located in Santa Barbara, which is a nice place for a little vacation. And we do have a lot of folks that come in for intensives. And that's the modality that we've found works the best over time. And so actually, the vast majority of our patients now come in and we usually do 1 or 2 sessions every day. And we do, on average, 1 to 2 weeks, sometimes 3 or sometimes 4 weeks. But the intensive model is it's really great. It's really great for neurofeedback too, even though I don't do much neurofeedback anymore. But it doesn't allow the brain to go back to its old ways of being. It doesn't let the brain go back to the paths of least resistance. And so after every 10 sessions, which is every week, we get a brand new EEG, a brand new ERP, for the individual. We administer a cognitive exam and we do that every 10 sessions. And so we subjectively track symptoms so we can watch their own self ratings as well. And it's a pretty good model. It works pretty well. Yeah. And so it's a little bit of time and a little bit of money. But what I say to folks, which is truly, my heart is I never want money to be a barrier or a boundary for people. That's not who I am, and that's why I don't deal with money, as Jay said at the beginning of this thing. I'm not the person that takes the money, asks for the money. I don't get into it. But that said, I think it's important for people to know that at least in working with me and my husband, I never want money to be a problem. I'm happy to work with people around that.
The only people that say money isn't a problem is the people that are loaded. So the training class, I want to get into this. I'm sure you got your 1,600 $2,000 version. Where do we send people to say, you know what, I want to sign up for that?
So we have 3 separate certifications. two separate certifications, and then we have a boot camp, and we have a ton of. I mean, I'm actually if I after I jump off this call in 3 minutes, I'm going to give a lecture on ERPs for chronic pain, but the base stuff, we have a BCN certification that's online, and Steph Ryall, brilliant woman, she leads our BCN online mentoring course. I teach an annual QEEG certification course in Santa Barbara in the summer. That's pretty good. I'm pretty proud of it. We also have an online QEEG certification course. This is at schoolofneurotherapy.com. And if people want to get into neurostimulation, learning how to get brain maps, learning how to analyze data, we have a boot camp, and that's been going on forever. And that's NeuroField centric. So that's the hardware software company. But then there's a whole host of stuff. You know, we have ongoing case studies. We have ERP case studies. I do special series. We have Catching the Waves of ERP with John LeMay. I have EEG for Beginners that I teach. It's a 10-course series on the fundamentals of how the heck do you read EEG. So we push a lot of courses, and I think they're pretty good. Yeah. And this next year, I should say, we're going to have Jay speak for us, which is so kind of him. And so I've asked him to dust off his old lectures, and because Jay doesn't like to ask for money, and I don't like to ask for money, we're not going to ask for money, and we're going to make
That's the problem with neurofeedback. None of you people ask for money.
We're gonna do Jay, I should say, is gonna do a free monthly lecture for the school, which is really cool and exciting, and you know, an honor. So
speaking of honor, Jay, what's going on in about a month?
Well, I have this birthday party, and it's an excuse to throw in a 3-day EEG meeting. And we plan a lot of fun and a lot of good science, and we've got a bit of a focus on epilepsy. Isabella, she's a tennis pro in Europe now, and she was an intractable epileptic that was told that she would have to have brain surgery or she'd die in her 20s. She's doing just fine, seizure-free for over 7 years now, and she'll be there. Lisa Tatrin be talking about movement disorders and Parkinsonism and Lewy body and so forth, and we've got a lot of really good work on that. She's one of the keynote presenters. Lee Steinberg couldn't make it because he's being installed in the International Sports Hall of Fame.
No excuse.
Which is an excuse that I'll accept from him because I know he deserves to be in the International Sports Hall of Fame. But he's got a recorded message for everybody, nevertheless. But we intend on having a lot of fun and a lot of good science, and it's being advertised as Gunkelman's Island, like Gilligan's Island, and it's got a Hawaiian luau for the party, and coconut bras and hula skirts, and there's a lot of craziness. The students that helps run it know that nothing is off limits. They have full reign to do whatever silliness they come up with. So
Tiff, you can boogie. We're
yeah, you're reading the room well. Thank you. I gotta go. I'll see you guys.
And okay. I've got a 9:00 consult.
All right, bye.
So
Dr. Marie, I got a bad night's sleep. Where do I get an app from? Bye, Jay. We'll close out with you, Dr. Marie. Go ahead, just you and I. Give me the app.
Yeah. Just like Tiff, we don't do remote at this time, but we do have potentiators. We have 3 apps that one is guided for focus, the other for brain calm, and the third for sleep. And we find that really potentiates the neurotherapy.
Dr. Marie Swingle, author of iMinds. Thanks for hanging out. We're the last 2 standing. I got to go work on my vagus nerve. See ya.
Have fun. Bye.
Hey everyone, if you're enjoying the show and want to help us keep it going, please consider supporting us on Patreon. Your support helps improve the content and brings on great guests and grow the show. Join us on Patreon at patreon.com/NeuroNoodle. But hey, if supporting financially isn't in the cards right now, no worries. You can still help us out for free by liking, subscribing, and sharing this episode. It really makes a difference and helps more people find the show. If we've earned it, hit that subscribe button and turn on notifications so you never never miss an episode. The NeuroNoodle Podcast is supported by listeners and businesses just like you.
Hey everyone, here's a quick message from our good old buddy Joshua Moore at Alternative Behavioral Therapy.
I'm preparing to do an introduction to QEEG phenotypes. This is my first workshop on the topic, and this is just the introductory overview of the project. This is going to be very, very basic. So let's review each phenotype. We're just going to go through them one by one. If you look at the DSM 1, 2, or 3, and you look at the first chapter, it actually acknowledges that the DSM in mental health is just, quote, a descriptive adaptation, unquote. We're going to customize the interventions and tailor them to the individual's brain activity, not just applying the treatments or trainings to the individual's phenotype and maybe even their variants, but also customizing the protocols themselves to fit that person's individual unique frequency patterns. Maybe a dozen ways to have excessive energy in your nervous system, and then there's an infinite amount of ways to relate poorly to that excessive energy, which means that there is a lot of variations in what someone might call anxiety. And that doesn't mean that we're talking about the same thing when we're talking about anxiety. So complicated stuff. But when we look at a brain map, we get some basis in which we can start talking about what is this energy. Then we have to go to the client. We have to start talking to the client about what is your association to this specific kind of energy that I can see now. Then we get to care about things that insurance doesn't restrict us on. We get to care about like the person in a broader way. 85% improvement in mental health report following pairing a medication with a specific phenotype. You know, geez. Okay, have you seen 85% in any mental health studies for any medication? I'm going to be going over a whole bunch of different types of tests, assessments, and things that can be used that have things called neurocorrelates, which you saw some of those already. Better success outcomes. That's what we really want. We need better predictive power. We need better individualization. That's what we want.